but we have today members from 5 different organizations or 4 different organizations who will be talking to us about changes within their organization and how they've dealt with them, building on their resilience. So really thanks to those people who have pulled this all together today. Just before we jump into that, if you haven't already visited, we have the full schedule for the whole of this Resilience Festival, and that can be found on our Capacity for Conservation website. So we have more sessions coming up this week, so please do register. There are still spaces. And I think that might be going in the chat. We've also set up a Slack chat room for the whole of the festival. And this is for people to connect and talk and hopefully share questions. So if there are questions arising from this session, particularly to those who are presenting or any other, and you don't have time to ask them today, please do put them in the Slack chat. And that's at the bottom of the screen here. But just be aware that by joining the Slack channel, it does make your address visible, your email address visible to everybody else in the channel. So it's up to you. So just a little bit more housekeeping before we move on. I've gone through the interpretation. So some of you may have joined. So if you need a different language, we have Indonesian, French, and Portuguese today. Please select your language, including if you are English, select that language too. Please mute if you're not talking, just to help with the background noise. And then we'll be using the chat quite a lot too, to get your responses and feedback. And also feel free to ask any questions that you might have as well. Okay. If there's any problems, Chloe is our operator today. She's behind the scenes. So you can also message Chloe directly and she's monitoring the chat too. So I'm going to hand over, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Martha, who will be taking the group forward today in our discussion. So thanks. Martha, over to you.
Great. Thank you all for being here, and thanks, Laura, for that wonderful introduction. Today, we have the privilege to hear from 3 of FFI's partners about their experience with organizational change. So I will introduce them briefly now, and then what we'll do is we'll hear from each of them in turn, and there'll be a chance for questions in between each, just briefly, but then hopefully at the end we'll have time for more discussion and sharing together. So I'm going to ask you to just wave when I introduce you, but Thiri Aung is from BANCA, the Executive Director at Biodiversity and Nature Conservation Association in Myanmar. And then next we have Nancy Ogonje, who is also the Executive Director, but at the East African Wildlife Society in Kenya. And finally, we have 3 colleagues from the Maio Biodiversity Foundation. We have Janete, who is the Program Coordinator for Education and Sustainable Development. We have Raquel, whose video is off. Oh, no, there she is. There's Raquel, who is the Program and Impacts Manager. And we also have Rocio on the line as the Executive Director from FMB as well. So I have just spotlighted all of you, so you got to wave. But I thought I'll now hand it over to Thiri to share from BANCA's experience. Thiri, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martha. Yeah, hello everyone. Good evening from Myanmar. So firstly, I would like to thank FFI to the me to involve in the sharing of our experience in the leadership transition in our organization, BANCA. Yeah, for the last 20 years now, BANCA has been in the fortunate position of engaging with the passionate leaders in the biodiversity conservation in Myanmar. These leaders form the core focus of our works from the very beginning of our journey. Often, leaders from NGO face the challenge of the identifying successor within the organizations and the developing the current leadership capacity of the employees. Similarly, BANCA faced this challenge during the period of the 20 years. In 2002, the BANCA began with the volunteer without appointing office staff, and the member of patron managed the executive committee. The executive committee member search for projects and carry out maintenance of conservation activities with the project staff. Until 2013, it was ran consecutively by two highly motivated executive directors. It wasn't so much an organization, but a network of biologists, foresters, and professionals of other environmentally related disciplines who as a member of BANCA were contracted to work on projects under BANCA's name. Conservation projects were usually led by the international NGO with BANCA, at the time BANCA as the partner of the national partner. Yeah, this was the usual modus operandi for the international NGOs. As sanctions against Myanmar made it difficult for them to formally establish their program in the country. Despite the constitution of the organization, there were lack of administration, human resource management, and the financial management. BANCA conservation agenda during this period was often seen as opportunistic and mainly defined by external experts. But at the same time, it was an important connection for building the capacity of Myanmar's new conservation needs. To be partnered with the BALIFE International Institutional Support Agreement from the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, RSPB, based in the UK, and Organization Development Front Advance, we call Amador, managed by the British Council in Yangon, Myanmar, began in 2013. In what turned out to be a dramatic and transformative year for BANCA. The initial focus of the British Council support was to establish a clear organizational structure for BANCA with a team of core staff based upon the new strategic plan. BANCA changed and revised the organization management structure, strategic action plan, and we developed the relevant policy such as the administration, human resource policy, procurement policy, and financial policy. At the time, BANCA changed the platform to Board of Governance, BOG, not only the term, but also the responsibilities of the BOG as well. It was the change that the executive committee to the senior management team, we call the SMT, including the responsible and committee members. In this change, BANCA could recruit the staff, and the senior staff have become as the member of senior management team. Board of Governance, BOG recruit executive director and who led the senior management team for day-to-day management in organization. However, this executive director didn't align with the organization's management practice in terms of communication with the government and the international partners. Thus began a freshness period of charge by the new director. For example, although BANCA have a plan to begin at BALIFE International Partner, the new executive director didn't support that idea. So staff also had the trouble with the new executive director's management style. It seemed like that she didn't believe in them to do their works. In my experience, the centralized managing in the team resulted in a decline in performance of staff, and some left their jobs during this period. Once the nature of leadership became clear, it led to the immediate resignation of some board members, particularly those who worked for the other NGOs and they were considered threats. The director assigned people she knew from her network organization as a new board member. The new director was also generally antagonistic to the international organizations and to any partnership in general, including with the other Burmese organization and the government. Poor communication between the executive director and the government and with the international partner. Also, it leads to the challenge for the BANCA staff. For example, there were challenges when they tried to implement the conservation activities for the protected area management with the Forest Department. In 2015, internet clash within BANCA, it leads to the director leaving, partly as a result of pressure from the Amador program at the British Council for BANCA to resolve its institutional problem. In addition, several board members resigned. At the time, one of the director's most senior part-time advisor, who is a retired Forest Department official and the former director of WCS, stepped in to fill the breach. This new director immediately sought to rebuild breach, stabilize BANCA, and restore its reputations. He worked carefully to rebuild trust between the government, BANCA management team, BANCA board of directors, and staff. His previous working relationship with experienced government officials facilitated good communication with the government. He also brought in a new board member to the BANCA. Within BANCA, the new director rebuilt the senior management team with a power sharing model, where the management team could talk and discuss organizational management. This model is still in the place today. The team is made up of the people with different background and different experience, so they are able to involve program, financial, and administration area. When there is a problem, the senior management team works together to solve it, drawing on these different backgrounds. Some of the current senior management team have been with the BANCA since it was started, so their experience and history means they can organize BANCA staff to work well now. After 2017, BANCA is well recognized both nationally and internationally as leading conservation of bird species in Myanmar. An important success has been that we have played a major role in building the capacity of BANCAs to deliver on the conservation of the biodiversity and to have a strong ownership of the species. The new director also supports the ongoing work, became a partner of the BioLife International. Nevertheless, despite a tumultuous period in 2015 and 2016 of internet conflicts, by the end of 2017, BANCA was recognized as a full BioLife partner. Most of the gain above remain. BANCA is more stable, and BANCA has more strong partnership and is well respected, including with the government. Establishing the role of the staff to be the senior managing provided solid foundation for BANCA, which has evolved since, including a doubling of staff size during the initial period of the organization development project, and the return to more manageable levels since. The senior management team is important because we couldn't fully manage the organization by just the executive director, so we need senior management team participation. When I stepped into the executive director role in 2019, I found that it's sometimes difficult to organize a senior management team and it's difficult to get the participations. But when the executive director and senior management team are able to discuss problems and solve them together, so managing BANCA became easier and better. Staff also have authority at a project level for managing field work, finance, and the administrations. They have confidence in their work and they can write their own proposal, which allow for the sustainable project development and BANCA. In the past, the director workload was heavy and difficult. The executive director have to do proposal writing and reporting and advocating with the government and international partners. Now, staff can decide themselves above the project implementations, which means the executive director can focus on the government relation and international partners. It also gives the executive director more time for the organization development. So the workload is more manageable this way. In Myanmar, staff salary is still in challenging truth. Then the national organization can pay at the same rate as an international organization. When we expect the staff to have higher capacity to do this, the project management, but we can pay the higher salary, there is a threat that staff might resign. But not all staff. Some staff are happy to have this authority and have an opportunity on the conservation management. Besides giving staff authority, I have also learned that it is important for staff to have a space to mention their feeling. I've seen other organizations who centralize in a way that staff, even with a higher salary, resign because they were not happy in their work at the organization. At BANCA, we have a meeting with staffs every month to listen to feeling and talks openly. I joined BANCA in 2008 as a project staff. Then in 2013, I became conservation manager in BANCA office. When I became the executive director in 2019, I faced challenges in the leadership transition, but learning from this experience, I continue to try my best to be the executive director of the BANCA. Thank you very much for the listen.
Thank you so much, Thiri. It's really great to hear from your experience of a very difficult transition with an executive director several years ago, and how those challenges led to a stronger organization today with shared power sharing across the senior management team,
exactly.
and strong listening with the staff. So thank you so much. I'm noticing the time, so I think what I'd like to do is ask if anyone has questions for Thiri, if you could put them in the chat. We'll start collecting questions as we go through, but maybe what I'll do, Thiri, if it's okay with you, I'll move on to Nancy next, and then we can come back to questions at the very end after Nancy and the presentation from FMB. Is that all right with everyone? So please do put your questions in the chat and we'll have discussion at the end. But thank you so much, Thiri. I'm going to hand over to Nancy now to share from your experience. I've spotlighted you, but I think you can share your screen so we can, if you want to share your presentation, I can unspotlight you.
Yes, I'd like to share.
Great, thank you so much.
Are we able to see it?
Yes, I can. And may I just say too, if you could speak slowly for our interpreters, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll try my best. All right, thank you so much. This is a presentation by East African Wildlife Society on how we use decision-making to minimize damaging financial impact of COVID-19 pandemic on our organization. So just a little bit about East African Wildlife Society. We are a conservation non-governmental organization. We champion the conservation of wildlife, forests, marine life, and wetlands. And we also promote the efforts to combat the loss of biodiversity and environmental degradation. We are strong, especially in advocating for policies that address drivers of climate change, such as deforestation, environmental pollution, and infrastructural development. We've been in existence since 1956, and we are a membership-based organization, And we work in partnership with like-minded organizations, including civil societies, government agencies, corporate organizations, communities, and individuals. So with regards to this particular presentation, just a moment. I'll be talking about how the impact of COVID-19 and how that affected especially our finances. And we all know that the pandemic was a global pandemic and is and was a global pandemic. And it actually affected also people at a local level. So nationally, we also had a health crisis issue. We had lockdowns and restrictions. There were quite a number of curfews within the country. I'm based in Kenya. There's been economic downturn as a result, and this is still being felt all over the world. There've been also business closures, and I wanted to also just highlight that there's been a big blow to tourism industry, and this is important for us as East Africa Society, being a membership-based organization. Most of our members are in the tourism industry, and so they were highly affected with the lockdowns, and most of them, their businesses were closed during that period. Some of them are trying to revive, and others never revived at all. So that had an implication on our revenue collection. And organizationally, also our staff in terms of mental health were impacted by COVID-19. Our operations were also affected, and also our activities were reduced, organizational activities. We also lost some opportunities, and even the way we worked has been different. So with that, the moment that it was announced in Kenya, that is in 2020, that the COVID-19 is a pandemic in the country, the board of directors made an assessment or an analysis of the risks involved. And we looked at the organization, and we said, we identified three main areas. One, we were expecting that there would be reduced organizational activities during that period. We were also expecting that there'll be change in operations in how we do our work. And also we were expecting that there'll be financial repercussions as a result. The risk assessment revealed that the finances were going to be highly impacted in comparison to operations and organizational activities. And therefore, a lot of emphasis was put on how we can be able to mitigate that, to control that risk. And we were able also to monitor the situation through whenever we had our board meetings on a quarterly basis after every 3 months. Now, as a result, there were decisions that were made by both the board and the management. And really, the objective was simply to keep the organization afloat and survive during that period, and also to remain relevant as an organization. So we had to keep things moving despite the shocks that we had attained. So the goals therefore became, one, we needed to stabilize our finances. And this we did by having budget cuts. We reduced our expected incomes by 46%. We also reduced our annual expenses by 31%, but there was an allowance in the budget for a deficit up to 25%, which was going to be recovered from our reserves. And then we also reduced the cost of production and postage of our Swara magazine. For those who know East Africa Society, we publish the Swara magazine on a quarterly basis. And it has very high costs because we have our members all over the world, and so we have to distribute the magazine all through. And this we were able to do through reducing the number of pages and also the number of issues so that we would drastically reduce the cost of both production and postage. We also were able to keep a lean staff, and that was important. During that time, we did not hire any new staff. But it was important to keep staff lean enough to be able to just do what was needed within the year. We developed a financial sustainability plan with the help of Fauna and Flora International to support us in recovery and also to build resilience of the organization. The other goal was to keep the staff motivated. We realized that during that time there was a lot of pressure, and the staff were experiencing fear and uncertainty. There was a lot of change that was happening, and so it was important to keep them, their mental status was supposed to be kept well. So we did have mental health awareness talks, and we had several personal reflection sessions with the staff, and we kept communicating with the staff during the pandemic, just to keep them, abreast, and also to keep them continuing with their work in a better way. Then we also adopted a motto during that period. We said that we were going to work hard as if there is no COVID, but take care of ourselves and others because there was COVID. So that helped us to continue moving on and doing our best within our capacity. The other goal was to keep the organization running with its activities. So one of the things that we did was adopt to new practices, because it was important to, to work, and we needed to go by what was possible at that time. We also gave discounts on advertising in our Swara magazine, understanding the economic situation in the country. We utilized that time or that period to do our new strategic plan. So we put that time into use because there was reduced activity. So we used that time to actually reflect on the organization. We kept our forums alive through virtual meetings, and we were also empathetic to our members, being a membership-based organization. And because we also understood that all of us, we were facing a difficult moment and we just needed to talk to one another. So that helped us, amongst other activities, to continue keeping the organization running. Then we also, another goal was to adapt to new ways for resilience and recovery. I realized that it is important that now, because there were changes, we needed to adapt. We could not continue doing things the same way we were doing them previously, but we needed to adapt to some different ways of working, and I'm sure most of us have also experienced the same. So we developed new financial policies, and one of the policies was to build a contingency fund, because this became important. Even though we did have our reserves, we didn't have a specific fund just for the contingency purposes. It was a general reserve. So we actually developed policies, and now we are building our contingency fund for the purposes of this kind of crisis when they occur. We adopted also to hybrid working. So we were working from home and also working from the offices. Then we also adapted to online meetings. Has taken off so much. Most of our meetings today are online, and it's quite actually cost effective for the organization. Also, we adapted to new ways of new office safety rules and identified new opportunities resulting from the pandemic. One of the things we've always had is the annual general meeting for members, and it has always been a physical meeting. Now, that meant that the global members could not be able to attend, but during the time that, during the pandemic, we discovered that we have more attendance through the online meetings than we have had in the previous years on a physical meeting. So that was a plus. Also, during that particular time, our board became very strong, and the subcommittees for the board became very active in decision making. Our subcommittees are in 4 categories. We do have the finance and fundraising subcommittee. We do have the governance committee that deals with the HR and administration issues. We have the advocacy committee that deals with all the advocacy activities, and the editorial committee. So in terms of decision making with regards to the organization, they have been very useful, and they've been giving advice to the management. Now, as a result of those decisions that were made and the actions taken, I just wanted to give us just an analysis or a graph of what that actually resulted to. The green columns are actually the budgeted incomes that we've had, and then the white columns are the actual incomes we received. The yellow line is the ideal situation where if we operate at 75% of our target of 100% incomes, then we are doing very well. but the minimum is usually at around 65%. So if you look at this, you realize that in 2019 and 2020, we were doing well, but there was already a decline in 2020 in terms of our actual incomes. And there was a dip in the 2021 where it was almost half to 39%. That showed that there was a problem with the finances. However, the measures that we had taken ensured that we were able to take care of the deficit, the red line, at 22%, which was within the 25% that was allowable. And then the actions we took further to reduce that deficit to 8%. So we increased our incomes and reduced our deficit to 8% in 2022, this year. And we are hoping that we can reduce further the deficits going next year, but we're also cautious with the global recession issues, and so we are monitoring that. So this is just to show that you can actually be able to stabilize your finances when you make very good decisions on how to deal with that. Then in the end, the lessons learned, I just picked out a few, but we learned quite a number of lessons. One, it is important to have a capable and supportive and also active board for important decision making. So you need to have expertise in your board that can be able to advise the organization when needed, and that should be able to help the organization to move in the right direction during crisis. And then secondly, it is important to have a contingency fund for cushioning the organization during crisis. So we realized during that time, because of that shock and the deficits we had incurred, if we did not have reserves, then it means the organization would probably have collapsed. So it's important to build that intentionally. Thirdly, it is important to have a financial sustainability plan. And financial sustainability plan is not just for finances, it also includes issues to do with operations, brand visibility, and in our case also membership and partnership and network. So it's really about how to run the organization. And that would help in terms of building resilience and also recovery for the organization. Fourthly, it is important to adapt to situations and adapt to new strategies of working for recovery. So you have to be flexible as an institution or as an organization when you are doing your work. If there is a crisis, then you need to know what else can you be able to do to continue being relevant and also to be able to recover from the situation that you're in. And then lastly, it's also important to identify in advance the threats or risks to the organization to avoid crisis situation. Like right now, we're undergoing the global recession. Already we are having a meeting tomorrow with our finance and fundraising subcommittee to look into this on how this will impact on our organization coming next year in 2023. So looking forward or focusing on threats and risk is important for an organization so that you can be able to preempt and prepare, on an early stage. And this is one of the things that we learned from our financial sustainability plan, that it is important to actually look forward or focus on situations and identify the threats. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that it is true that you can actually survive on a lean budget. We realized during the crisis that when we were reducing our budget to bare minimum, we realized there are some costs that actually the organization is incurring that were not really necessary for the organization, or the organization can actually do without them during the crisis. Some of them were important, but not that you cannot work without them. So it's important to analyze your budgets every year to see the areas where you can actually do without, some costs that you are incurring. Basically, I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. There was so much in there. I especially appreciate the process that you shared about identifying the risks really specifically and your goal of keeping the organization running during the pandemic and how you did that. It wasn't just physical health and money, but also mental health, communication, board involvement, and how you balance the books in a way so that the deficits were stabilized. So thank you, thank you. I am going to go ahead and request that questions, if you could put any questions in the chat, that would be amazing. And then I'd like to invite our colleagues from FMB to share now. And then if there's time at the end, I hope there will be, we'll take some questions and have a discussion with everyone. So I'd like to hand it over, I think, to Janete. Is that right? Okay.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Janete, and thanks to FFI to give us this opportunity to share. I am here to present you the challenge of sustainable organizational development. FMB is a non-profit, non-governmental organization based on Maio Island that was born in wetland area with scientific study of shorebird since 2007. Our main objective is to protect environment and promote sustainable development. From the beginning, it's become clear that we need to create an environmental NGO to take care of this island, quite thin, but with a big potential to be to have a sustainable development. In 2010, FME has officially formalized by 5 people. Nevertheless, the statute was very powerful, and the power is centered on the president and the founder. During the next 7 years, the organization starts to grow. More funding, more people, and more areas like turtle, protected areas, and environmental education. Despite this progress, there was a weak control and monitoring of the evolution FMB by the board. They did not organize election properly. They did not update all the minutes in the minutes booklet, or not more meeting necessary, or they did not manage to supervise FMB finance or implementation of the project. So in 2017, we received a fund of MAVA Foundation for 6-year projects, and also funding to develop an organizational development action plan for improved FMB. In this context, the board tried to find a solution to the governance of FMB, but they failed because was a division of opinion between different staff member boards. to solve it, they went to the court, and since summer 2020, the operation and decision of FMB have been carried out by the director and entire technical and coordination team to protect this organization and not get it died. Finally, the court opened the case and called the board to solve it. In front of this disagreement between the board and members, the director hired assistants to mediate this process and propose an agreement between board and members. As a result of the process, a new statute is approved and a General Assembly will be organized on 18th of November and choose the new members to governance body FMB. Mission determines some change like team spirit, good communication and transparency amount of the staff, despite the pressure from the director to end the coordination team to the board and delegation justice for getting the resolution. Guidance, support and guidance from the funders like FFI and MAVA. Challenges. Unable to establish a delivery plan for the transmission from the current to the new board FMB. Application and approval of new projects without the supervision of board involvement. Learnings. Avoid having majority of board members from abroad who are far away from the daily reality of the island. Seek external support from funders and partner with transparency, and involve and environment local people. And thank you for your attention, and I am open to answer some questions.
Muito obrigada, Janete. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for sharing about FMB's challenges and changes in recent years. It sounds like it was a very difficult situation with your board not functioning as it should, and it took some really challenging, difficult work with the court to make it work, to smooth things out. But I love that one of your lessons was that team spirit, communication, and transparency, as well as both internal and external support, can help move through these challenges. So thank you for those great lessons learned.